I never thought my years as a Navy SEAL would ever be relevant in a cookie-cutter suburb, where the biggest drama is usually someone's grass being half an inch too long or a trash can left out for 12 minutes past pickup. But life has a funny way of bringing the fight to your front door, just when you think you've hung up the uniform for good. And let me tell you, when 3 guys in tactical vests showed up at my house acting like they own the pavement I pay taxes on, they made the single biggest mistake of their lives by thinking I was just another middle-aged guy who'd roll over for a piece of plastic and a fake badge. It was one of those humid Tuesday afternoons in our neighborhood. I call in, quote, the terraces, and quote, though it's really just a maze of beige houses and people who spend too much time looking through their blinds. And my wife, Elena, was out front doing what she loves most, which is tending to her rose bushes when this charcoal gray SUV starts doing laps, circling our cul-de-sac like a shark that's lost its way or a predator looking for a gap in the fence. And after the third pass, it just stops, right across our driveway. And 3 guys hop out looking like they're auditioning for a low-budget SWAT movie, wearing these stiff, dark tactical vests with, and quote, HOA enforcement, and quote, patches that look like they were ordered off some shady website at 3 in the morning. And honestly, the whole vibe was just wrong from the jump. Now, Elena is the kindest soul you'll ever meet, but she's no pushover, and she just stood there with her garden shears in hand, watching these 3 stooges march up our lawn with this unearned swagger, led by a tall, lanky guy with a buzz cut and a sneer that looked like it was permanently etched onto his face, while the other 2, a shorter, stocky guy who looked like he'd spent his life being a bully, and a younger kid who looked way too nervous to be there, fanned out behind him like they we're clearing a room in a war zone. And the tall one, let's call him Miller, pulls out this shiny gold badge and flips it open so fast you'd think he was in a 90s cop show, barking out that they were there for an, end quote, immediate compliance intervention, end quote, regarding our property violations. And when Elena calmly asked him since when the HOA started hiring paramilitary groups to check on flower beds, the stocky guy just smirked and told her that, end quote, the old rules are gone, lady, and we're the ones making sure people like you learn how to follow orders, end quote. Which right there is the moment the hair on the back of my neck should have stood up if I'd been outside. But I was in the garage, deep into cleaning my old gear, lost in the smell of CLP and memories of better men than these clowns. The tension out there must have been thick enough to cut with those garden shears, because when Elena told them to get off our property and that any legitimate HOA business had to come through a certified letter, Miller didn't an oppose. Back down, he actually stepped in her personal space, looming over her in a way that's meant to break someone's spirit. And when she pulled out her phone to record the trespass, the stocky guy didn't an oppose, to even hesitate. He just reached out and swiped the phone out of her hand, sending it skittering across the driveway. And then, and this is the part that still makes my vision go red even talking about it, he backhanded her a sharp, stinging slap that echoed off the front of our house and sent her stumbling back into the rose bushes she'd been so carefully pruning just moments before. I heard the shout, I heard the sound of that phone hitting the concrete, and something in my brain that had been dormant for years just clicked. It wasn't oppose to even a choice. It was a physiological shift where the air gets colder and your heart rate drops into that steady, rhythmic thrum of, end quote, it's time to work, end quote. And as I walked out of that garage side door, I wasn't oppose. Just a guy living in the terraces anymore. I was the man the government spent millions of dollars training to handle problems that other people couldn't and oppose to even fathom. I stepped onto the lawn just as Miller was laughing, telling Elena she should have been more cooperative, and I didn't an oppose. Yell, I didn't an oppose. Scream. I just walked up behind them with that quiet, heavy footfall that comes from years of moving through places you aren't an oppose. Supposed to be, and when I said, end quote, I think you boys are in the wrong neighborhood, end quote. The way they jumped was almost comical if it wasn't an oppose. So pathetic, and Miller tries to regain his composure, puffing out his chest and tapping his fake vest, telling me they're on official business from the HOA board president, Mr. Henderson, a man who's had a grudge against me ever since I pointed out he was embezzling community funds for his backyard pool last year. And he tells me I need to step back, or, end quote, things are going to get official, end quote. And I just looked at him, really looked at him, noticing the cheap nylon of his belt, the plastic toy holsters that didn't and oppose, to even have real sidearms in them, and the fact that none of them had a radio, because in the real world, you don an oppos. T go into a hostile environment without a way to call for help, and I realized these wearing and oppos. T just HOA goons. They were losers playing dress-up, empowered by a petty neighborhood tyrant to terrorize a woman who was just trying to grow some flowers. I told Elena to go inside and get her backup phone and call the real police. And for a second, the stocky guy who hit her tried to step in her way, but I just shifted my weight 1 foot slightly back, shoulders squared, and I gave him a look, the kind of look that usually tells a rational person that they're standing on the edge of a very deep, very dark hole. And he froze, his bravado leaking out of him like air from a punctured tire, and I told him they had exactly 5 seconds to identify themselves with state-issued IDs, or this interaction was going to change flavors very quickly, and Miller, bless his stupid heart, decided that was the time to try and be the big man, reach for a collapsible baton on his belt that he clearly didn't in oppos. T know how to use, and he started shouting about, and quote, assaulting an officer of the association, end quote, which is a term that doesn't in oppos. T exist in any legal book I've ever read, and as he swung that metal stick with the grace of toddler, I just stepped inside the arc, my left hand catching his wrist while my right palm drove straight into his nose, feeling the satisfying crunch of cartilage that signals the end of a conversation. The stocky one lunged at me next, but he was slow, heavy, and fueled by nothing but cheap aggression, so I just used his own momentum, a simple pivot and a sweep that sent him face first into the very driveway where he'd dropped Elena's phone and the youngest kid, the one who looked like he'd rather be literally anywhere else. He just backed away, hands up, his eyes wide as dinner plates as he watched his two, end quote, tough guy, end quote, mentors groveling in the dirt, and I didn't in oppos. To even have to touch him, I just pointed at the ground and told him to sit, and he sat down right there on the curb like a well-behaved dog while I put my knee into the small of Miller's back, pinning him to the hood of his own SUV, which, ironically, had a, end quote, neighborhood watch, end quote, sticker on the back window. By the time the actual deputies rolled up, sirens blaring and lights painting the beige houses in shades of red and blue, the scene was pretty self-explanatory. 2 grown men in fake police gear moaning on the ground, a terrified kid on the curb, and me standing there with my hands visible, calm as a Sunday morning, while Elena showed the lead deputy the footage she'd managed to capture on her secondary device before the slap. And let me tell you, the look on that deputy's face when he realized these guys were impersonating officers to enforce, end quote, lawn care, end quote, was a mix of pure disgust and the kind of, end quote, I can't wait to write this report, end quote, excitement you only see in people who really love their jobs. But the real kicker, the thing that really turned this from a neighborhood scuffle into a full-blown war, was when Miller started crying, actual, sobbing tears, and blurted out that they were only there because Henderson had promised them $500 each to, end quote, intimidate the veteran at number 42, end quote, and make him sign over a land easement for a new community park that would have conveniently increased Henderson's property value while cutting right through my backyard. And, realization that this was an end oppos. T just a petty HOA dispute, but a coordinated criminal conspiracy involving assault and impersonation made the whole air in the neighborhood feel different, like the mask of suburban civility had been ripped off to show something really ugly underneath. Of course, Henderson didn't in oppos. T go down without a fight. He actually had the audacity to show up at the station that evening with a high-priced lawyer, claiming that I was the aggressor and that he'd hired a, end quote, private security firm, end quote, to handle a, end quote, high-risk compel. Iant's issue, end quote, but when my lawyer, who happens to be a guy I served with and who specializes in making people like Henderson regret ever being born, showed the judge the video of the slap and the photos of the fake badges, the, end quote, private security, end quote, defense evaporated faster than a puddle in the Vegas sun. The court case that followed was like a slow-motion car crash for the HOA board. As it turned out, Henderson had an oppos. T just targeted me. He'd been using these 3 thugs to harass elderly residents into selling their homes for years, and the moment the community realized their, end quote, fearless leader, end quote, was actually a wannabe mob boss using HOA dues to pay for his own personal hit squad, the entire board was dissolved in an emergency meeting that had more shouting than a stadium at the Super Bowl. and Henderson ended up losing his house, his reputation, and his freedom for a few years on conspiracy and racketeering charges, while the three goons are currently sitting in a state facility thinking about how much they hate tactical vests. But what's really stayed with me, ISN and Oppos, the fight or the court dates, it's the way the neighborhood looks at us now. Some people cross the street because they're scared of the, seal who broke the HOA, but others, the ones who are being bullied in silence, they bring us cookies and thank us for finally standing up to the playground bully who ran the neighborhood into the ground. It makes you wonder, though, how many other, Hendersons, are out there right now, hiding behind a clipboard and a set of bylaws, thinking they can push people around because they have a little bit of local power? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever dealt with an HOA that went off the deep end, or a neighbor who thought they were above the law? Did you stand your ground, or did you have to find a different way to fight back? Because at the end of the day, a badge, even a real one, doesn't in Oppos, give you the right to put your hands on someone's wife or trespass on man's home. And sometimes, the only way to deal with a bully is to show them exactly what happens when they pick the wrong house. Make sure to hit that like button if you think those guys got what they deserved, and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about what happens when the quiet guy in the neighborhood finally has enough, because trust me, this wasn't an Oppos. The last time the terraces tried to test my patience, and I've got plenty of stories left to tell.